back to Riding the Pine. This is our review of Game 42 of the 2020-21 Chicago Blackhawks season. Tonight, the Chicago Blackhawks defeated the Columbus Blue Jackets by a score of 4-3 with a come-from-behind win. It was a great thing to see. But before we get to the review, if you could do me a really huge favor, hit that like button down below. It helps us out a lot with YouTube's algorithm. Also, hit that subscribe button if you have not done so already. For us to continue to grow, we need to grow our subscriber count. So please hit that subscribe button if you have just happened upon this video and this is your first time coming into the show. Also, hit that notifications bell so you will be updated every time that we upload. In other words, we will have to come to you. You do not have to come to us. Every time we upload, you will know when we are. And with that, I will take over. I believe this is probably my last solo podcast here, as Joe will be back from vacation this week. So enjoy Kyle solo because it's going to be one of the last times here on this podcast. Now, with that, let's get into the game. So, not a great start to this game, obviously. Turnovers, bad battles on the boards led to two quick goals. And I believe the first 4 minutes, roughly, of the game was a very uh, bad start. Was not looking good. And Jeremy Colleton finally used a timeout, finally started yelling, finally showed some emotion on the bench. And I have to tell you, many of us have been asking for this for quite a while now. And the results, I think, speak for themselves. The Blackhawks, after that timeout, dominated the game. They, I think, held Columbus to something like 2 shots over the next 19 minutes, something ridiculous like that. The Blackhawks just thoroughly dominated play after that timeout. The third period, Columbus had a bit of a pushback. Usually, when the Hawks have a lead going into the third period, we've been seeing that the Hawks have problems closing teams out. I think a big part of that is they just do not have the offensive ability to just take over a game and finish it out. That's something that they definitely need to be working on. I will say, though, the Blackhawks did score 3 goals on 5-on-5 tonight. That was nice to see. They did score a power play goal, and it was the game-winning goal, was that power play goal. Or I guess it wasn't the game-winning goal, but it was the goal that mattered as the Blackhawks won by a single goal, and it was with that power play goal. You know, like I've been saying, time in and time out, the Blackhawks do not win usually if they do not score on the power play. Because they have been so lackluster and inefficient at scoring 5-on-5 this season. Obviously, tonight that wasn't a huge issue as they were able to break through with 3 5-on-5 goals. Nice to see. Matthias Janmark was scratched before the game in an effort to keep him healthy for a potential trade deadline move. The trade deadline acquisition of Brett Connolly, I think, all but sealed his fate that Janmark will be dealt at the deadline. Here's hoping that the Blackhawks get at least a second-round pick for him. I think that's what he's worth. I hope they don't take less than that, but we will see. Back to the game. So, again, those 2 quick goals. One was from Michael Del Zotto at literally 63 seconds into the game from Texier and Delp. And then Cam Atkinson, boy, he has killed the Hawks this season. Again, from Jack Roslovic, what a huge pickup Columbus has made with that Jack Roslovic and Patrick Laine acquisition. I have to say, too, they traded Savard before this game. So Columbus was shorthanded, probably their best defenseman, arguably, and Savard was dealt. And look, they got a first round pick, I believe, and a third round pick for him. And to me, that was a way overpay that they got for Savard. So huge, it just seems to me that the Columbus wins almost every trade they make, and you gotta like that for the GM. I think their GM, Jarmo Kekalainen, is one of the best GMs in the league. Hit the problem obviously is that he's in Columbus. Not a lot of players want to go to Columbus. Um, it hasn't been built up into, and look, I heard their former GM. I can't remember his name, but he was on the Kuiper podcast that I was listening to a while back, and he's routinely on there as a guest. And he was saying, I think for good reason that the Columbus fans really support the Blue Jackets, and that's great. And I think there's truth to that because if you look at um, the three teams that came in right about the same time with Nashville, Columbus, and Minnesota, Minnesota, I don't think was ever a question as to whether that team would survive. I think the NHL knew that they had a mistake as soon as the North Stars left for Dallas. Um, but they're Nashville and Atlanta came in as well, and Atlanta, of course, did actually leave for Winnipeg. I do think that the NHL will be back in Atlanta. I know a lot of people keep saying that Atlanta is not a hockey market. It doesn't work there. They've tried it twice. I don't care. Atlanta's a huge, huge television market, and the NHL is losing money by not having a team there. With and we're seeing it, right? I mean, we're seeing it. I think this would be a great podcast. Maybe we can do with Joe, or somebody else potentially, just because we did announce, by the way, I want to mention that the Splinters was going to debut with a Jack Adams episode for Colleton versus Q. I don't think we're going to be doing that anymore because I think it's Colleton is not going to win the Jack Adams. I don't think at this point, so there's no really point in doing that. But perhaps we can do a discussion on that later on, just on Jeremy Colleton. But I do think it would be an interesting episode for Splinters to do an episode about a potential expansion. And I really do think Atlanta is a huge market that the Blackhawks, the NHL is going to want to get into just because of the TV market. The area is growing. The southern United States, for those who may be retired or those of you who are not, in your youth, let's say anymore, not in your 30s and 20s, the southern United States is a huge, huge growing market from Florida to Georgia to North Carolina to Texas and Oklahoma as well. I mean, all of those states are growing at exponential rates. Even Kansas, all of those states are growing wildly with population because of new jobs coming in and a lot of those things. Houston, for example, is expected to overtake Chicago as the number 3 television market in the United States within the next 10 to 15 years, maybe even sooner than that. We're not far away from that. And you're talking in Houston and Atlanta, two cities that the NHL is not currently in, have two of the top 10 television markets in the country. And for a league that needs to repair itself after this pandemic, though, in those two growing markets of Houston and Atlanta, the NHL would be foolish not to try to get into those markets. Um, and I think Houston is no doubt probably next in line after Seattle, but absolutely the NHL, and we're getting a little off topic here from the game, but the NHL is, I think, leading up to having a 40 team NHL within the not very distant future. But back to my point. So the point with Columbus and their fans, when they came in about the same time as Atlanta, Nashville, themselves, and then Minnesota, there was a lot of thought that Columbus would eventually move. And there was a lot of skepticism as to why Columbus was chosen in the first place over places like Cleveland, over Cincinnati, other places like that. Especially Cincinnati, I think, would have even made even more sense than Cleveland potentially, because you're on that Kentucky border and you've got an instant rivalry with Nashville there, right? And Atlanta that they just brought in the league. So Cincinnati would have made a lot of sense at that time, but they went to Columbus. It was a growing market then. Continues to be probably the best market in terms of growth in Ohio, between Cincinnati, Cleveland, and Columbus. Um, so that is a huge thing. But the problem is that the perception is bad, right? The perception, which is what I'm getting to, they have support, which speaks volumes. I believe this is maybe their 20th anniversary of the team being in Columbus since their expansion. That is an amazing feat. It's an amazing thing to say that they've accomplished, but it's not, the perception still isn't there. The perception that it's a hockey market, that it's a good team. And part of that has been their success, right? They haven't had success. They've only gotten past the first round of the playoffs once. They've only ever been to the playoffs a handful of times. So for this team, I think it's a huge success story with what they've done, what their GM is able to do with these traits. I just think part of the problem with them not being able to get over that hump, if you will, to attract free agent players, stars, is that they've been either bad or that it's perceived as a not very good market. I think, and it's not a nice place to live. That's another, perception out there among players. You look at Panarin leaving, you look at Bobrovsky leaving, you look at all these stars leaving as soon as they get there, and that hurts the market, right? That hurts the team. So I'm hoping that they turn that around. I think we've seen it be turned around in Carolina. They're a top of the league team now. I think their attendance has went way up with their storm surge and their stuff that they've been doing marketing wise. And we've also seen that, I think, this season. Granted, we're in COVID times, but we've seen the success, that's the potential of the Florida Panthers in Miami, especially when you have a instant rivalry with the Tampa Bay Lightning there that they can now build off of now that both teams look to be successful. I think that's a huge development for Florida going forward. But with that, again, I think the GM of Columbus has done a fantastic job in acquiring star players and draft capital, which was evidenced in the trade made before this game last night/today, whenever you are listening to this podcast. Um, with that, Alex DeBrincat got on the board with a power play goal. Huge goal. Blackhawks had a 5-on-3, I believe, for a little bit. They're almost, well, probably about a minute and a half, a minute and 40, something like that. They scored just at the tail end of it. Calvin DeHaan and Patrick Kane picked up the 2 assists. Good to see Patrick Kane get on the scoreboard again. Carl Soderberg would score about 7 minutes later from David Camp and Ryan Carpenter. David Camp has been a name mentioned as a possible trade deadline piece. I think that's extremely possible. I would have thought they would have preferred Ryan Carpenter, but I think the reason that this is there is because I think Camp is more valuable than Carpenter in the eyes of Seattle. And I think when you're Stan Bowman and you're looking at the players that will be exposed, um, and who is the most attractive to the Seattle Kraken, well, obviously you want, right? They want DeHaan to be taken. I don't think that's in question at all. The problem is that Seattle may value David Kampf over DeHaan, who's an injury-plagued defenseman with a pretty sizable contract, compared to David Kampf, who's a restricted free agent and still on the younger side of his career. So that's a potential reason that has come up. In the second period, Wyatt Kalynuk very early on scored his first professional goal, our favorite kitten, uh, as we like to say. First professional National Hockey League goal. Congratulations to him. Well deserved. His patience has paid off this season. He was on the ice for all three Chicago Blackhawks 5-on-5 goals. Another great sign from him. He did have some turnovers, I will mention, though, that were pretty bad. So kind of a mixed bag, maybe, if you will, but having scored his first goal of his career, I think we got to give it to him a little bit on the positive side, obviously. Pius Suter and Calvin DeHaan again picked up the assists. And then newly minted father Dylan Strome scores again from Kirby Doc and Alex DeBrincat. What you will not see on that goal is the amazing outlet pass that was done by Adam Boquist. It was a great outlet pass from Boquist. Boquist, I will say, has been better since he came back from COVID. I don't think he's still performing at an elite top four defense level, but he has been better. You have to admit that he has been better since he came back from COVID. So we will hopefully continue to see some development there, continued development there, and maybe one day he does reach that full top four potential that they thought that he had when he was drafted. Um, so we will see. And then Patrick Laine scored a late goal, his 10th of the season. He loves playing the Blackhawks. I think half of his points this season have come against the Blackhawks. So, yeah, Blackhawks were able to hang on, though. I thought Kevin Lankinen played very well again. He stopped a breakaway. I don't remember who it was. I think maybe it was Sherwood. Somebody got a breakaway, and he just stonewalled them, and it was off a pretty bad turnover from, I believe, Zadorov, but I could be wrong there. But yeah, Kevin Lankinen, I think, again, numbers aren't very good, but I think that more line goes with the defense because the defense held the Blue Jackets, like I said, to like 2 shots in 19 minutes. I thought that was fantastic for their defensive players and their play all night. I also liked uh, pretty much how the lines played out in terms of ice time. I thought uh, Camp still maybe getting a little too much at 15 and a half minutes, but maybe you're showcasing him to move him. DeBrincat at 18, I think, is good. Strome only at 14 and a half. I'd like to see that a little bit higher. Kubalik at 1340. Pretty good, I think, time on ice for Kubalik. Kurashev's up to 12 minutes again now that he's been promoted uh, up into the top six. Nice to see for him, I think. Uh, Also had 3 minutes of power play time for Kurashev. Love to see that. Pius Suter played almost 19 minutes tonight. That's a little surprising. Hinostroza at 13 and a half. Not bad for him. Hagel 13 and a half. Doc 1740. I'd like to see Doc's minutes come down maybe just a tad, but a lot of that was inflation from power play time as the Hawks had 5 power plays tonight. So Doc played almost 6 minutes of power play. So that's probably why his minutes are so up there. Um, Defensively, Kalynuk got 14 minutes. DeHaan played only 8 minutes, but still got 2 assists in that 8 minutes. Obviously, he left the game injured. Didn't play, I don't think, at all in the third period. Um, Adam Boquist, 20 minutes. Zadorov, 17 minutes. Connor Murphy, almost 27 minutes. Duncan Keith, almost 26 minutes. Duncan Keith is playing too much. I'm sorry, but he is. Uh, Duncan Keith should be about at 18 minutes, I think. Uh, at some point, you have to give your rookies more ice time. Look, I think the less Keith plays, the better Keith will be, and it will also allow you to develop your younger defenseman more. I don't really have a problem with Connor Murphy playing that much because I think he's probably your best defenseman right now. But I would like to see Kalynuk play more. I'd like to see why. I mean, that's just it, right? Boquist's got 20 and a half minutes almost. Why can't Kalynuk get up there? I think I'd like to see that. Um, but yeah, going into the next game here after the trade deadline, I expect moves. So I think we may see Brett Connolly get his first crack in the lineup. I think it's also potential that we could see Stillman, who was also acquired in that trade, make his Blackhawks debut as well. Um, I think it's, if DeHaan is given a night off, I think we could see Stillman make his Blackhawks debut. So I think we could see both Connolly and Stillman enter the Blackhawks lineup here come next game. Uh, I'd like to see Subban play. I think Lankinen probably deserves a night off at this point. Um, and look, Lankinen can't play every night. I think they said he's played all but 2 games out of the Blackhawks' last 14. I think it's a good Monday, I believe, is the next game. I think it would be a really good um, thing for Subban to get the start on Monday. Um, Obviously, I'm a huge Kevin Lankinen fan. I'm the only person that called him being the starting goaltender of the Blackhawks this season. I've been calling it for 2 years. Look, when you listen to this show, I'm not always going to be right, but more times than not, I am right. And, I've been calling everything they've done to a T. I've called pretty much everything they did in the offseason, uh, from inquiring on Matt Murray to, Kevin Lankinen being the guy, uh, everything that could potentially be there that I've commented on. And I'm not trying to toot my own horn here. I'm telling you, this is a reason to subscribe to our channel. More times than not, we have good discussions here. And I know what I'm talking about. I'm not some random 20-year-old guy that's, stealing other podcast logos. And I'm not, some beat writer that has a hard on for certain players. I'm going to give you the lowdown on what's actually happening. I'm going to tell you the stuff. Joe as well. It's not just me, but everybody here at the podcast. It's a great community that we're building, and it's a knowledgeable base. And that's the goal of this podcast, is to build a wonderful Blackhawks community and a knowledgeable community that can weed out the stupidity that goes on online, the blatant biases and stuff. To me, that's not fun. To me, I think the fun aspect of being a Blackhawks fan or being any hockey fan is knowing what you're talking about and seeing the positives in the players and seeing the negatives, right? Knowing that you know what you're seeing and knowing that you're right. That's a huge thing. So yeah, I mean, there's a lot of podcasts out there, people that have never played, people that are 20 years old that have no idea what they're watching, people that are stealing our old podcast logo. We can, I'm not going to let that go. I should, but I'm not. Um, because they're one of I'm just gonna tell you, I'm not gonna say who it is, but it's one of the bigger fan podcasts out there. And they literally stole our logo that we paid for to have designed. They knocked it off almost verbatim. So that is what it is. And not just that. Not just that, but if you know what our old podcast was called, they also ripped off our name. They ripped off our name and they ripped off our logo. Like, we could probably sue them if we wanted to. It's not worth it, obviously, but that's how bad it is. It was blatant what they did. Um, but whatever. There's another podcast out there with one of the stupidest people that I've ever come across. It that thinks he's a genius. Another college student who only has his subscriber count and podcast because a certain other person who's actually in rate Chicago radio handed him off his basically podcast and that community and fan base. It's a joke. It is what it is. If you want real Chicago Blackhawks talk where you're not going to be degraded, as long as you're respectful, everyone's opinions matter here as long as there's no name calling. I say that as I just, rip a bunch of other podcasts. But to me, if you do the stuff that's been done at those other shows, they deserve it, right? I have no problem working with other podcasts as long as they're respectful to us and as long as they're not literally stealing our content. That's big thing with me. And you're not just, weird, creepy college kids that, have their issues. Anyway, so yeah, please subscribe. Again, we were the only podcast, the only one. And this iteration of the podcast didn't even exist yet. I was over with Josh from On Tap Sportsnet. I was on his former podcast, Natty Nights, and we talked. We did Blackhawks exclusives. I talked to him on there about how Kevin Lankinen was the guy, all this stuff. We called it, the people on this show. And Josh has been on our show. Hopefully, I'm hoping to get him back on eventually as well. We'll see how that goes. Maybe it's one of a one-off. I know he's busy with a lot of stuff, so hopefully we can get him back for some one-off shows or some specials. I think that would be a very nice addition to our show. But again, please hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and hit that notifications bell. We are growing. We are going to be the best damn Chicago Blackhawks podcast on YouTube and on Twitter, anywhere on social media. So sign up, join, and let's have some fun. Again, as I said, previewing the game on Monday, I expect probably Brett Connolly to draw in potentially. I think Stillman, depending on how DeHaan is holding up, if they give DeHaan a night off, I think we could potentially see both of those players make their Blackhawks debuts on Monday. And I personally would like to see Malcolm Subban get the start on Monday. I think Kevin Lankinen deserves a night off. And with that, everybody, I want to thank everybody for listening, humoring me for some rants and also diatribes, stuff that I'm passionate about, like the expansion of the NHL. Again, thank you for listening in. I want to say again, please stay healthy, do what you can for your loved ones and your friends. More than anything else, I think that's the huge thing right now with what everybody's been going through is taking care of your loved ones and your friends. To me, as someone has, at 30 years old, both my parents are gone and I have no siblings. My friends are my family. And I think it's so vitally important to check in on your friends, especially during trying times like this, to help them out. Let them know that you're there for them. It's a huge relief when you reach out. And I know I talked to one of my really good friends the other day. It's been a while, probably a month since I talked to him. It was a great thing to just talk to him. And I think, or I would encourage all of you to do that. I think it will help out both with your own life and theirs. I don't think we appreciate that connection that we hold with our friends, or at least some of us don't. We get caught up in our everyday lives and we kind of lose that connection. So please do that. Make sure everyone's healthy and safe. We're coming out of this thing, guys. We're almost back to normal. I think we're going to be back to normal at least as a society, I can't speak for our government, but I think as a society, I think by the time we get to the late summer, I think we're going to be back to normal, at least as a population. So with that, everybody keep doing what you're doing. Let's get out of this. Let's get healthy and stay safe. And until next time, everybody, we will be back with our review of Monday night's game of Game 43, the Columbus Blue Jackets and the Chicago Blackhawks. And until then, let's go Hawks.